North Carolina can be a wonderful place to live. But today, I'm going to give you 9 reasons why you might want to avoid this place. So stick around. Hey, I'm Will Wofford. I'm a Raleigh realtor, and if you're interested in learning what it's like to live in Raleigh, North Carolina, so you can buy real estate and move to Raleigh, North Carolina, then this is the channel for you. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and go ahead and ring the bell so you'll be notified when my next video comes out. So I have lots of people reaching out to me and asking what it's like to live in North Carolina and what can they expect, and I absolutely love that. So if this is you and you have any questions about what it's like living in Raleigh, North Carolina, or living in North Carolina, make sure you leave a comment after the video or reach out to me with a phone call, text, or email, because I really do enjoy talking to people about what it's like relocating to North Carolina. So today we're going to talk about the 10 reasons why you might want to avoid moving to North Carolina. Now I want to make this clear. I'm not saying that these things are negative or positive, because I've lived in North Carolina for my whole life. So naturally I've formed my own opinion with a good feel for the state of North Carolina in general. And I hope this video helps you decide if North Carolina is the place you'd like to call home. So number 1 on the list, North Carolina is a purple state, which means the cities generally tilt toward the liberal side. Once you travel outside of the cities, it becomes conservative quickly, and for the most part stays that way. And there are parts of North Carolina where you'll see the MAGA flags, the Trump 2020, or Trump 24 flags still flying. And a majority of these people don't believe in masks or the COVID shot. And then you have the large metro areas like Raleigh or Charlotte and the suburbs where you have a much more diverse population that for the most part follows the rules. So what I'm saying is the metro areas have a completely different feel and tone to them. So I would say North Carolina as a whole is by no means a homogeneous population, because I think you'd have to be crazy to think that, right? But I would call the people of North Carolina a unique bunch. Because in the small towns or the rural areas, as you head to the mountains or the coast, if you're from Raleigh or Charlotte, you might as well be from another state, because the locals are always going to consider you an outsider. And North Carolina is a right to work state, so the people of North Carolina support that, and I imagine some people like that and some people don't, but that's just the way North Carolina is, and may or not be for you. Now the second reason you might not want to move to North Carolina is the weather. The weather on the eastern part and the western part of the state can be extreme, which triggers power outages. The eastern part of the state near the coast does get severe weather, such as hurricanes, tropical storms, and flooding. The high risk of flooding in the eastern part of the state comes from hurricanes and extensive rain. When the lakes in the northern parts of the state reach capacity, they have to release water, which I've seen put an entire town underwater. I've personally seen this happen in Greenville and Kinston, North Carolina, and it's nuts. On the western portion of the state, there are mountains, and you often have to deal with significant amounts of snow during the winter, or flash floods that can cause mudslides, which can bury you. But I suppose what concerns me the most about the mountains is just how steep the mountain roads are, and what I would do if my brakes went out, or you slid on the ice coming down the mountain. So those are the extremes that occur in the eastern and western portions of the state. But each year, something happens. But for the most part, the heavily populated areas of the state, and I'm talking about the Triangle region and the Triad region and the Charlotte area, the weather really doesn't get that extreme. If you can handle a little snow, and I do mean a little snow, because on average, Charlotte gets around 5 inches of snow a year, Raleigh averages around 3 inches, and the Greensboro, Winston-Salem area averages around 5 inches per year. And I would say 3 to 5 inches is typical for a majority of North Carolina. So if you can handle a little snow, North Carolina might just be the perfect place for you. But let me tell you, when there's any potential for snow or ice, the whole state shuts down. Because here in North Carolina, we really don't have the infrastructure to clear the roads or salt the roads fast enough. And temperatures can get very, very hot during the summer months. But for the fall months, temperatures are almost perfect. So you'll definitely get all 4 seasons if you live here in North Carolina. Let's move on to number 3. North Carolina does have some crazy, and I mean crazy, wildlife. Now, I live right in the middle of the city of Raleigh, but at least 3 or 4 times a year, I'll see a deer or a family of deer in my yard or my neighborhood. Now I know that's not crazy by itself, but I kind of wanted to ease you into the crazy stuff that comes with living in a lush environment with lots of trees and moisture. So if you can't handle the thought of discovering a snake in your garage or your yard, well, North Carolina is probably not for you. We have lots of snakes in North Carolina, but only a few are poisonous, like copperheads, water moccasins, and rattlesnakes. But truth be told, you're most likely to encounter a copperhead if it's a poisonous snake. On several occasions, I've lifted up things in the yard and found copperheads coiled up underneath. I've also had a huge water moccasin swim right under my feet when I was sitting on a dock holding my boat. And I can promise you, that thing would have made your hair stand up. And if you've got friends on Facebook that live in North Carolina, you'll see pictures and posts about snakes that they've encountered or somebody in the neighborhood has recently encountered. In fact, just last night a friend of mine posted a picture of a copperhead he found in his yard and killed. Now this next one used to seem crazy to me, but North Carolinians are now encountering alligators. And some of these gators aren't small by any means. In fact, my wife's family has a farm in the eastern part of the state where we regularly go on the weekends. Last time we were down there, I heard a man training his dogs in the woods in the early morning. And I kept seeing the man in the truck on and off that afternoon looking for his dog. The following day, the man found about a third of his dog. Come to find out, a 10 to 12 foot gator ate the dog. So you want to be really careful if you can't really see in the water or if you're in an area that doesn't really seem safe. We now have bears all over North Carolina, and we even see them in Raleigh and Chapel Hill. And for the most part, bears really don't bother you that much. But if you're out camping and have some food lying around, you need to be super careful, especially if it's dark. And we've also got lots of smaller animals like flying squirrels, raccoons, and possums that'll try to get into your attic or go through your trash, as well as deadly spiders like black widows and brown recluses. I've known several people that have been bitten by brown recluses, and you likely won't know you've been bitten until the infection sets in. And it's almost always bad if it's a brown recluse. But the odds of that happening are pretty slim. Fourth reason you might want to avoid North Carolina is because tourism is a thing here in North Carolina. And our state is a destination spot for lots of people. The North Carolina mountains attracts people from all over that come to see the Biltmore House, the Smoky Mountains, the Blue Ridge Parkway, Chimney Rock, and Linville Falls, for starters. And of course our coast has lots of notable attractions like the Wright Brothers Memorial, the Outer Banks, Bald Head Island, Tryon Palace, and the USS North Carolina battleship. So as a resident of Raleigh, I can tell you there are lots of things happening in the middle of the state as well. And some tourists are coming here to see the museums that we have in Raleigh, like the Museum of Natural History, Marbles Kids Museum, the North Carolina Museum of Art, as well as Olmsted Park and the Moorhead Planetarium in Chapel Hill. So there's a significant amount of tourism here in North Carolina, and as a resident, you really do feel the influx of people because our infrastructure and our roads here in North Carolina are already a little bit congested during rush hour. But when there's an event in town like the State Fair that brings tons of people in from all over the state, it's almost unbearable in certain spots as traffic gets jammed up and it really gets seriously backed up. So as a resident here in North Carolina, when there's an event taking place, you really do have to plan accordingly for your ordinary trips to and from the grocery store and to work. All right, the next reason why you might want to avoid North Carolina, especially the Raleigh area, is because people here can't drive. Now I'm sure the transplants are going to argue with me on this one, but the facts are the facts. The roads in North Carolina tend to be a bit confusing, and people that aren't from here and don't know the roads well, so they tend to get lost a lot and spend most of their time trying to figure out where they're at instead of keeping their eyes on the road and driving. Also, the people from the eastern or western portion of the state aren't used to driving in heavy traffic, as a large part of North Carolina is rural. So when these folks come to the big cities like Charlotte or Raleigh, they're just as lost as someone that just moved here from New York. And there are lots of hotshot drivers here with souped up cars, trucks, or motorcycles that are super loud and obnoxious. Now I don't know where these people come from, and they might be from North Carolina, but you need to worry about them as well. You know the ones I'm talking about, the ones with the flags mounted to their trucks or lights over or under their vehicles with their stereos so loud that you feel like you're at a concert. Truth be told, a lot of these people might actually be from North Carolina, so keep that in mind. Now let's talk about the sixth reason why you might want to avoid North Carolina if you have allergies. And for some of you, this might not be a big deal, but I can promise you, for some people, this is going to be a big deal. If you've got seasonal allergies, you might not want to move to North Carolina because the pollen gets so thick here during that time of the year in the spring, that just as soon as you wash or blow your deck off, it's back and it's completely yellow. And yes, it's that serious. So I recommend that you stock up on the over-the-counter allergy medicines like Allegra or Claritin, because you're going to need it. Now, some local beekeepers will tell you can eat raw honey to counter the effects of the pollen, but I wouldn't bet on it because this pollen is no joke. All right, the number 7 reason why you might want to avoid North Carolina is for those of you who like diversity or diverse population of people. Outside of the big cities and the metro areas like the Triangle or Charlotte, North Carolina is seriously lacking in the diversity department. So if diversity is something that's important to you, you may want to avoid North Carolina or concentrate your search to some of the larger cities within the state. The 8th reason you might want to avoid North Carolina is because there's a population boom that's occurring here, and people are moving to North Carolina at a very swift pace. If you're thinking about moving to North Carolina with the hopes or idea of getting a really nice house in a sparsely populated state, and in that case, North Carolina might not be for you, unless you want to live in a rural area, and we have plenty of those. Now, I mention this because I've had a lot of people that have called me, and they've told me that the most important thing for them was getting as much land as possible for their money, and they'd end up figuring out the house part later. Trust me, that's nuts. But if you want a compound, you may want to buy a farm, and we have lots of those around the state. But the more realistic way to approach this, I think, is to ask yourself if you're willing to pay an inflated price for a home in the larger cities like Raleigh or Charlotte, where the price has increased significantly as more and more people have continued to move and demand for housing has risen. And the 9th and final reason you might not want to move to North Carolina is because North Carolinians love their guns. And if you don't like seeing guns or you don't like seeing people with guns, then North Carolina might not be for you. Now, if you live in the large metro areas like Raleigh, Durham, or Charlotte, this might not be an issue. But if you spend time in the eastern part or western part of the state, you'll almost certainly see or hear lots of guns. Now again, these are my top reasons why you should probably avoid North Carolina. Now, I'm not saying these are negatives, and I'm not saying they're positives. I've lived here my entire life, and this has been my experience and what it's like to live in North Carolina. So please let me know what you think, and let me know if any of these talking points are positives or negatives to you. Now, if you're serious about moving to North Carolina, please be sure to reach out with a phone call, text, or email, and I would be glad to help you. And if you liked the video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to learn more about life in Raleigh and where to live, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you'll be notified when my next video comes out. And I'll see you on the next one.